Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. We're very excited to have such a strong turnout. I think we have over 300 people attending today's conversation, and we're excited to get things started. First, I kind of want to touch on a few things. We here at Liquid Diamonds feel it's important to provide a platform for our industry's leaders to discuss the rapid change we're all experiencing and provide some perspective for everyone to appreciate. And so, in that light, we couldn't do this without you as the audience. So thank you. And we hope that you enjoy today's conversation with two gentlemen who we think can provide some unique opinions on the state of the market and the retail space specifically, and kind of where the future is going to take us. Before we begin the conversation, I want to make sure that for those of you who have never used this platform Crowdcast before, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see, a link that says "Ask a Question." That'll be seen publicly, and during the course of the conversation, we'll keep an eye on those questions from you all as the audience. There's a chance that some of you might want to ask the same question. So one of the neat features about Crowdcast is they allow you to vote on existing questions. So if you see a question you want to ask that's already been asked, just click on the vote arrow, and that'll kind of prioritize it. We'll make sure to try to get to all the questions. Certainly the ones with the most votes, and we encourage you all to ask as many as you'd like. I think we've got an opportunity here to kind of, like I said, hear from a couple of really solid voices within the industry, and this is a good opportunity for you to ask those questions. Secondly, my name is Garrett McGinnis, and I'm the head of growth for Liquid Diamonds. We are a B2B online marketplace for certified diamonds. Our customers include manufacturers and traders and retailers throughout the world. And while I'd love to discuss how we solve buying and selling problems in ways that no other company does, the focus of today is to gain these perspectives from our generous guests, and I'm excited to get the chat started. If you'd like to learn more about Liquid Diamonds, at the end, I'll share my contact information, and I encourage anyone who would like to have a chat about what we do and who we are to please reach out after the webinar. Now that's out of the way, I'd like to introduce our guests. We have Mr. Erich Jacobs, president of the JBT, and Jeff Wickersham, president of Wickersham Jewelry and board member of the RJO and LJG. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Jeff, let's start it off with you. Would you mind introducing yourself to the crowd, just so everybody knows who you are? And then we'll switch over to Erich.
Sure. I'm Jeff Wickersham from Wickersham Jewelry. I'm vice president of RJO. And I also sit on the board of Leading Jewelers Guild. I have 3 retail stores with my family in north central Wisconsin. So we are curbside only for business right now.
Okay. And Erich, if you don't mind doing the same.
Not at all. My name's Erich Jacobs. I'm the president of the Jewelers Board of Trade. For those of you that are not familiar with the Jewelers Board of Trade, we are a member owned organization that shares financial information amongst its members. And essentially, we're sort of the credit rating agency for the jewelry industry. I'm a relatively new president, just started a little over a year ago. And I'm actually not from the jewelry industry. I actually have a technology background. And then one key fact that my co-host, actually, we've never talked about this before, I'm also from Wisconsin, even though I live in Boston. So we can talk about the Packers after this.
There you go.
I don't know about the quarterback draft pick there, but that's neither here nor there.
No comment.
So, yeah. Well, let's get it. Let's dig in here. I think that everyone would love to hear your thoughts, on the state of the market and what's going on globally with coronavirus. Let's I guess start it with Erich. I think. Would you mind offering us your opinion of kind of today, what you think is going to change as a result of the disruption we're enjoying right now?
Yeah. Actually, can you give me full screen real quick? Just
yeah, that'd be great. Sure.
Let's see if this actually works. Did it kick in?
Not quite yet. There you go. You got it.
Okay. So hopefully what you'll see here is an overall chart of GDP growth that we've been tracking. This Jewelers Board of Trade has been around for 134 years. So we've been around and we've been kind of tracking this. And Actually, I'm going to change this just a little bit so we can show something here. Give me a second. There we go. And you know, the thing about this particular element we're in right now, it is unique, right? It is like nothing else we've ever seen before, not only because it's just not economically driven, but it's also because it's medically driven, but because of the speed at which this decline has happened. We look at a whole bunch of different metrics. One of the more interesting ones we've seen recently, it comes out of the Federal Reserve that basically tries to estimate the impact on GDP, a number of factors. And they basically are saying, hey, we're looking at 11 to 12% decline in GDP in this current quarter as a result of this. And if you kind of look at the Great Depression, it looks really, really scary, right? Because the line is so much bigger. But at the end of the day, on a percentage basis, it's actually a lot less than the Great Depression. The little, the sort of explosion mark that you see on the chart right above my head, that's where we would have to be if we were going to be equivalent to the Great Depression. So yes, this is really big in a very short period of time, but it's not necessarily the worst in the world in terms of you know, what had happened in prior years. Still kind of hard to figure out where we're going, because there is the whole sort of science aspect to it that right now everybody kind of expects that there's going to be some sort of eureka moment in the science world, right? That essentially at some point the uncertainty is going to go away because the science is going to get so much better. But at the end of the day, the reality of science is that it's kind of a squiggly line all the way down to doing things, and that can make things kind of difficult to understand. Are we improving? Are we getting better? So, you know, basically our approach right now has been to say, nobody really knows what the answer is, right? And you can take me back to a partial screen now. Nobody really knows. We think it's going to be kind of a long slog. We think that obviously the jewelry industry is going to be impacted more than a lot of other industries because of its, you know, not being cleared non-essential or being cleared as non-essential. And we also believe, and some of this might be my own personal bias, that it's going to change the industry up and down the supply chain. And what I mean by that is that the movement towards online and other types of basically virtual transactions all the way up and down the supply chain, from retail through all the way back up to the mining piece of it, is going to drive a level of transparency and velocity of information that the jewelry industry may not be very comfortable with initially, or certainly has not been comfortable with in the past. So it'll be very interesting to see how this shakes out. We think there are going to be growth elements as a result of that, but there's also going to be a shakeout in terms of companies that can't really get on board with new business models. They're going to have a harder time surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Jeff, I mean, let's kind of switch to you. You know, boots on the street. You know, what are you seeing out there? You know, what's working today? What's not? You know, what are some of the changes you're seeing happening right now in the industry?
Well, there's every day is a change. There hasn't been a normal day for over a month now in our industry and actually the world, I guess you can say. But you know, talking with everyone, and the biggest thing that I've gotten from this is communication has been the biggest asset for all of us, and continuing to partner with your vendors and communicating with those vendors. Everybody is just there to help, from the jewelers making sure that the vendors are going to get paid, and the vendors helping out when they need to by deferring payments too. So everybody is helping everybody out, and it's a pleasant thing to see in our industry. So, I mean, if I say I'm sheepishly positive of what's going to happen, but again, I'm like Eric. I cannot see the future. There was no way back in March that I saw the JCK or Las Vegas being shut down, and it did, obviously. So I don't know. I don't know what to see in this future, but we have to take it one day at a time. And it's a great thing to see people getting their PPP and now getting their disaster loan, $10,000 money coming in. So at least they're getting some funds to operate, and that's the first thing. That's the positive that we have to look at.
Understanding that nobody has a crystal ball, Jeff, let's look back in time at, maybe the great, recession of 2008, 2009, or maybe prior downturns, the .com bubble burst, et cetera. Obviously, the retail market has evolved in the past. Can you speak to maybe some of the things that occurred in those two downturns in terms of change or evolution, and kind of what you get a sense for the trends are right now in a current day fashion?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm going to see right now is back in 08 and 09 is really when gold, scrap gold purchasing over the counter was huge, and saved thousands of jewelers from going under, including mine. But I don't see it being as effective as previously. But it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to market totally different, because obviously there are no such thing as big promotions and more the merrier type of events going to be in your store, at least not anytime soon. So those are the things that I see are going to be a big change. You're going to really have to take some effort and train your staff, if you haven't, that appointment only type basis events are going to happen once we get open, because I think it's going to be a real quiet opening for a lot of us. Share.
Let me stay with you, Jeff, on this topic, because I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper. I mean, you hit on something that I've heard mentioned in other articles and webinars that I've been attending here the last few weeks, and that's really the idea of how are you keeping. You mentioned you have 3 stores. How are you keeping your employees busy? Are you doing any sort of cross-functional training? Are you reaching out to clients? Getting people trained up on how to leverage social media maybe a little bit better, or just furloughing people? I mean, obviously, you can speak specifically to yourself, and also potentially what you're hearing some of your friendly competitors are doing right now.
I have kept all my staff on from day one. So we've been shut down, I believe it was the 24th or 26th of March. We just got our PPP a week ago. So I paid for 3 weeks basically out of my own pocket. And a lot of my friends in our industry have done the same also. As for keeping them busy, it's great to see that there are so many webinars like this one and others out there to help continue that education. Now that they have time to actually educate themselves, this is a great opportunity for them to advance themselves. We even had a local college here who offered online certificate courses, not just in the jewelry industry, but just in management and social media and so forth. So we've got my management group taking courses and receiving certificates through that, along with obviously social media and things that are way above my head when it comes to the technology part of it.
Got it. So do you feel like the steps that small, medium-sized businesses are able to take with regard to some of the emergency loans and the PPP program are there? It sounds like they're a short-term Band-Aid. Hopefully, most folks are taking advantage of them or already have taken advantage of them. I think that given that we don't know what happens in the future, say 3 months from now or 6 months from now, when those funds are depleted and we have an unknown certain future with regard to treatments and the virus spread, I mean, can you anticipate? I guess this question would be for both. I'd like both of your perspectives, but since we're talking with Jeff here, let's close bookend Jeff for the moment. Jeff, I mean, can you anticipate some consolidation within the retail space? Have you already seen some consolidation? Or would you say that maybe smaller jewelers, because they're more eligible for some of these programs, relative to larger players, publicly traded companies, et cetera, might be better prepared to weather the storm? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be who is the best in managing their money, their finances, and so forth. I don't really necessarily think it's going to be small, medium, or large that it's going to hit or affect less or more of. It really comes down to, again, I feel, is surrounding yourself with a group of people, like, for instance, being involved in RJO and leading. They're the only two owner-owned memberships in this country, and so they have their own ownership to it, obviously, that we have to take care of ourselves, and there's a lot of good communicating that goes between them and the smaller groups get together, like a Plexus or Collected Concepts and Retail Business Optimization. These are companies that and groups that are helping each other out, and I think it's a huge asset for all of us to jump on and use.
Awesome. Erich, same sort of theme here. I'd like to get your thoughts on maybe a macro perspective, given the JBT's reach. I mean, what are you all anticipating in terms of consolidation, if any, as it relates to the different segments of the retail space?
Yep. So I'll ask you to go full screen again, because we've actually been looking at this pretty close. So if you want to cut over that, I just got two things to share with you that can kind of maybe give you some ideas there. So the first one is, we did look at the impact of the retail industry on the jewelry industry in prior recessions, just the most recent ones. And it really was trying to figure out how we can take numbers that are coming from the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Census Bureau and try to figure out what is the likely impact to the jewelry industry right now. And what we found was that at the last recession, the closest analog in terms of shrinkage really came from the automobile industry, right? And it makes sense. That's a discretionary purchase. But you also can see the gray line here. The orange line is the auto industry and what happened to it. The blue line is basically retail sales overall. And the orange line and the gray line is the jewelry industry. And the jewelry industry basically took a hit in 2008. And then it just didn't recover as well. And obviously it didn't get the bailout funds and things like the automotive industry, but it took a little harder hit in terms of that. And then specifically related to that, we actually track business discontinuances. Let me get that up here. So we track, how many companies go out of business in every quarter. And you can see that at the last two recessions, and remember, there was kind of a mini recession in 2016. They call it the invisible recession. In both cases, there was almost a 50% rise in the number of jewelry-related organizations that either ceased operations or consolidated with other folks. And so we anticipate that there will be consolidations and ceased operations as a result of this. But we also anticipate that it's going to take longer for that to actually flush out, because everybody is shut down right now. It's going to be harder to figure out who is shut down permanently and who is shut down just because of the crisis, and they will be coming back. That will take some time to sort of flush out. What we are also seeing is a lot of these retailers right now, some are getting the PPP funds, others are not. Some of it seems somewhat random in terms of whether or not you have a banking relationship and how that all worked out. So definitely will be some consolidations here and some decline in the business. Whether or not that'll be permanent, we don't know.
Jeff, can you look at your that first graph you showed and just guesstimate from the beginning of the downturn in the retail or automotive sector to the bottom in the jewelry sector? It looked to me like the jewelry sector was a little lagging in its downturn timing. But the duration of the peak to the bottom, what was the quarterly number on that? Just for comparison's sake, do you know that figure?
Yeah, it's actually in there. You can see it. So the jewelry industry dropped about 22% in the 2008 thing. So if I was trying to right there, right, about 28%, or 22% relative to the automotive being 28%. In this latest decline, where the Census Bureau does not release jewelry numbers, it's just not material enough. But in the latest numbers they ran, they said that the automotive industry dropped 26%. So, we kind of look at it right now. We think this is just through March, right? So this is just the March number, which you really sort of have to think through. That's half of March, really, when the shutdowns really happened. So, 25% decline is probably a reasonable estimate for half of March.
I'm thinking more so in terms of time. It's a little grainy on my screen there, the left side peak in terms of time to the right side trough on the x-axis there. How much time was it from peak to trough?
Oh, so that was about a year.
About a year.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Obviously, different dynamics today.
It was about a year for the automotive industry. Looks like it was about. It looks like for the jewelry industry, they kind of coasted through the Christmas season of 2007, right? And so they didn't take as big a hit as the automotive industry, which was already taking a hit in 2007. The jewelry industry took a hit, starting in January in 2008, and it dropped off a little faster in terms of time frame than the automotive industry.
So 3 to 4 quarters based on that downturn's parameters.
Yes.
Obviously, this downturn's parameters. Obviously, everybody's hoping that we can kind of limp back into normalcy here over the next 3 to 6 months, but we'll see how it goes. So I think I'd like to kind of switch gears a touch here, Eric. Stay with you and kind of start talking about the trends in online buying and selling. I mean, how do you see jewelry being consumed, in this in the online world context, and what are retailers doing well in the space? Where do they need to improve in terms of platforms and just outreach there? I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I know you've got kind of a technology background, so it's near and dear to you. Please share what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so interestingly, usually the transition to an online selling model for industries that are not, particularly well suited to an online selling model, it takes a while for that to happen. You sort of think about buying used cars online or even new cars online. That was a model that took a while to really happen and take off, and really hasn't really taken off until just a few recent years. And that's because you needed some sort of early explorers to go out there, kind of push it, get the venture funding, do all that. And eventually the market goes, yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it kind of works up. And then finally network effects kick in and the whole thing. Where this is really unique is basically because of the restrictions put in by the COVID crisis, everybody has bought into the concept of, oh yeah, let's try online, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a retailer or a vendor or a supplier. Everybody is basically saying, should I be promoting my product online? Should I be selling my product online? Should I be interacting with my B2B partners online? All those sorts of things. Everybody on every side of the equation is jumping in on this. And to the extent that the growth in the jewelry industry for the past few years has been in the online piece. So if you looked at overall online jewelry sales for the past couple of years, or overall jewelry sales without online, just jewelry sales period, the overall growth has been, depending on what analyst you talk to, between 0 and 2%. Not terrific. I mean, okay, right? But the growth in online jewelry sales prior to COVID was somewhere between 15 and 25% per year, which means it was cannibalizing the original business. And now you throw in COVID, and basically, I have an 80-year-old mother-in-law who shops at Tiffany's, who never looked at Tiffany online. She's looking at Tiffany online, right? That barrier has been broken. And typically when people go online, when they start doing things like that, they don't go back. I mean, you might have a little bit of pendulum swinging going on, but I think it's here to stay. And a lot of folks are discovering that there's a lot of platforms out there to do e-commerce on now. I mean, you get Shopify and BigCommerce and WooCommerce. Just about anybody can get a website up and selling stuff fairly quickly. Whether you can do it good, that's a separate question, but you can get one up fairly quickly. So, you're seeing, a lot of that. You're also seeing some folks who are trying to do things that are, trying to replicate the experience of going to the store. I'm not so sure that's always successful because, creating, for example, a full 3D model of your store and having a virtual walkthrough, that may not be the most optimal thing, because really the online engagement experience is different, right? It's almost a different skill set. And so, there's going to be a lot of learnings that are going to happen in the retail industry to pull it off. But the good news is the cultural barriers have been dropped because everybody's doing it. We're doing this webinar right now.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that I think it's the writing's on the wall there. So it's you got to embrace it. It's no longer a competitive advantage. It sounds like it's a necessary thing to keep up, right? So let me ask you, Jeff. Let's take it to your business and or what you're seeing other retailers doing. How are they leveraging both B2B platforms? Like whichever ones you'd like to talk about. And then, where do you see those trends correlating to the B2C space for your end consumers?
Yeah, we've been working obviously fairly close with some of our vendors via virtual imaging and them sending back and forth and doing these type of meetings, and just trying to stay close and communicate with them again is the biggest part. And I think that's where staying on top of things and on top of a product that obviously they have in stock versus custom made is going to be the key part for that. Then moving into selling to the consumer, we're not e-commerce right now. We're working on it, but so what we've been doing, and a lot of my friends in a group that we have are doing a lot of Facebook Live and been selling on Facebook, and it's been fairly successful. So I'm pleased with that. But again, like Eric said, this is something new, and everybody's learning it, and thankfully everybody has been accepting it in our area. So it's good that there's no animosity of change when it comes to this type of stuff.
How have like sites, Jeff, for you, how have sites like James Allen or Blue Nile impacted your loose diamond sales historically? Have they not?
We here we're kind of in a smaller community, and so we don't get as impacted by that as much as the larger communities do, I believe. But yeah, we run into it every once in a while. But it really comes down to is the service that you have to provide and the warranties that you can provide for them, and just making sure that you're there for them every day, and all they have to do is drive to our location and we can help them, versus worrying about insuring your diamond and sending it back and the ring back and make, hopefully it doesn't get lost in the mail. And so, yeah, you have to continue to fight that. Their profit margin on loose diamonds is ridiculous, but we're in this world and we have to figure out a way to move forward.
Sure. Do you feel, Jeff, that online businesses, as Eric mentioned, are going to accelerate after this? This is actually a question from AD in the audience right now. The specific question is: do you feel the percentage of online business will accelerate post COVID, and by what percent in the next, say, 5 years?
Yes, there's no question. This is going to continue to grow as it has been before this COVID-19. At what percent? Boy, I can't tell you. I can see it obviously going faster than it probably was, just because there's going to be people who are scared to go anywhere, and I think it's going to be for quite a while. And I have nothing against that. Everybody has their own opinion on this, but I really think we just have to continue to work on knowing that we're here and we're local jewelers, and we're here for our community. So we support our communities, which and gives back to everybody that's buying.
So Eric, let's look at maybe a larger subsect, take us out of the community jewelry space and look at more of the macro space. Obviously you touched on it a little bit. It's tough to have a crystal ball, but you said 15-25% a growth rate before COVID. Do you think it's going to stay at that rate? Do you think it's going to increase? Do you think that in 5 years' time we're looking at a situation where a retailer could see over half of their business coming through from an online perspective?
Yeah, so we anticipate it'll definitely maintain that pace, if not better, in terms of the percentage growth of online. Now, remember, again, that's not all of the jewelry industry per se, and a good piece of that, by the way, is also going to be omni-channel, right? Which is being able to market yourself online, being able to give some tease as to what you have, and still having folks come in the store. But that said, we do anticipate, yes, online will continue to grow, and it will, just continue to take more and more share, if you will, even when it's associated with a brick and mortar store. It's just going to become a requirement.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. There might be some additional questions related to this topic that we might get to later, but for the time being, I kind of want to keep things moving and switch gears to a different topic, and that's finance. We've kind of touched on it, just a bit with the different, government-sponsored programs that folks are taking advantage of. But Jeff, you'd admitted that you were able to cash flow your payroll until you got that Band-Aid. How are you seeing other retailers, managing cash flow today? And what do you think the financial model for sustainability looks like? I mean, is it having a 3-month emergency fund? Is it having a 1-year emergency fund? Are you going to make any changes as a community retailer to give yourself cushion for assuming things go well this time around for the next time it happens?
Well, first of all, as the old saying goes, cash is king. So the more cash you have, obviously, the better. But yeah, it really comes down to, and I strongly believe this, and being on the boards of a couple buying groups, working with your community banks, and making sure that you have the funds, lines of credit or whatever there are available for you, I think is extremely important to keep your business successful. As a local jeweler, you have to work with a local bank, and they're there for you to help. So again, it's another one of those, you got to communicate with your bank and communicate and stay on top of things. But when it comes to changing the way we look at our budgets and so forth, absolutely. That was the first thing I did when I found out that we were shutting down, is I started cutting back on everything I could possibly do. And I took second and third looks at everything I did just to realign my budget up. So yeah, it's a change in time. I did it. We did it back in 08, 09, and we're doing it again. And we're going to continue to change until we get out of this hump. We have to.
Yeah, I would just add to that. So what we found talking with the vendors, because large number of our members are vendors, is, the key to this, getting through it from a financial perspective, it is to communicate with your vendors, right?
Totally.
Even if if you can pay them, pay them. I mean, because the vendors are businesses too, and we don't need all of them going away at the same time because nobody's paying them. But if you really are truly in a situation where you cannot pay your vendors right now, the right answer is talk to them. There's nothing worse you can do than to ghost a vendor, because
it's a partnership, right, Eric?
Yeah, exactly. It's a community. Everybody's still, who knows how long this will go on, but right now everybody's trying to help everybody else. So, the idea, even if it's going to be an unpleasant conversation, have the unpleasant conversation, because it's much better than doing something later on.
Totally agree. And vendors have been wonderful to work with. Every vendor that I've worked with and friends that I've worked with have been awesome, and I can't thank the vendors enough.
Yep.
That's great to hear. Hopefully it continues, right? So I want to ask Eric, if you could speak a little bit to the the JBT announcement of pre and post COVID credit ratings, and generally, what types of rating drops is the JBT giving or seeing across the board, and how people are going to work with these, in challenging times, like, just if you could comment on that and kind of give us an update on what you're seeing in the trend format on that end.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, just for folks that aren't familiar with it, as I mentioned before, we are sort of the credit rating agency for the jewelry industry. And so we actually do issue credit ratings on companies when we're requested to do so. And what we did as part of the COVID crisis is we made a conscious decision that said there's a whole bunch of folks that'll be negatively impacted by this crisis through no fault of their own. So what we did is we actually modified our credit reports so that all of our credit reports all show a pre-COVID rating. So what the rating of the company would be prior to the COVID crisis. And then we show a current rating based upon the reporting that we get from all of our members. And that basically gives anybody who wants to extend a line of credit all the information they need to know, because things could go both ways, right? You could have a credit rating that goes down because somebody is, now not paying as fast. But you could also have somebody who basically was not a good payer to begin with. And all of a sudden, if somebody starts changing their terms, they start looking like a good payer. In both cases, we wanted to expose that information. In terms of what we're seeing in trends, it's a little too early to say. There's a built-in lag in how we do our data. There is no subjectivity in our data. It's all run through algorithms and through our systems. And typically the way that works is we have to wait for our members to report into us. And they do that on a periodic basis. So they report into us what their experience has been. Then it goes through our system and then it spits back out. We anticipate we will see changes, but those changes won't be apparent until probably the first or second week of May. Then we'll be able to give you a better assessment of who's been impacted and not.
So we've got a relevant question from the audience from Sahil on this for you, Eric. I think you've already touched on one of the points, but I'll say the whole question. I think there's two that are pretty still open-ended right now. One is, what type of ratings drops is the JBT giving or seeing across the board? Two, is it worse in big box or independents? And three, how frequently are credit scores updated? If things are better in 2 months, does the JBT update the ratings then? So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, it's a little too early to give the across the board sort of assessment. My intuition tells me that it'll probably be the independents that'll get hit a little harder than the big boxes, unless, well, I would say big box. When you say big box, we're talking about big box. I can't say the same about department stores. I mean, that's public information, right? They're getting hit pretty hard. So in terms of how frequently the credit scores are updated, Basically, we get updated information all the time. We sort of have there's sort of a large push of changes that happen basically once a month because of the way the cadence works of information we get from our vendors. That said, changes are not really predicated on whether or not things are getting better. The change in a credit score is always predicated on, did we get new information about that particular retailer or that particular vendor? At that time, that new information is incorporated, and the basically the credit rating changes at that time. So if someone's having a rapidly improving situation, their credit score will rapidly improve. Their post-COVID credit score will rapidly improve. Someone is not, it'll take longer.
Got it. Okay, thanks for clarifying all that. Jeff, I kind of want to dig a little deeper here, in terms of the financing and how it relates to, your day-to-day. I understand every retailer is different, but I guess, as a retailer, how are you planning to purchase new inventory moving forward, if any?
Well, yeah, we're going to have to buy for the fourth quarter. So right now what it is it's looking at trying to sell what we have in stock of our assets. Obviously, we have to try to move our assets first to create no more bills or payables. After that, obviously, we would work with other vendors and try to get some type of memo program put into place if it's possible. And that's where working closely or having some core or key vendors that you work with is very important, because obviously if you're working with them, they're going to work with you and give you more in payables or I should say into giving you more distance and pay, and also in giving you in some more memo goods to help with you through the future. But yeah, are we going to have to purchase? Yeah, of course we're going to have to purchase. It's not probably going to be soon, that's for sure. We have to get out of this funk first and get open and get our feet on the ground. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do for some events, because we obviously can't, and we're not going to be able to, across this country, most likely have big events in our stores. We'll probably have to do one-on-ones and so forth. So that makes it a little tougher too to promote and to organize. But we're starting to do that, and it, knock on wood, we've here in North Central Wisconsin have got a really good support from our communities, and hopefully it continues to grow, and hopefully it does across the country, that our communities support the local businesses, because that is the biggest key to it. No more Amazons and no more China, and we got to keep fighting and working together as a team.
So depending upon, we have, quite a few supplier, diamond manufacturer relationships, trader relationships. I'd say that's the majority of our client base right there. That said, depending upon who we talk to, I mean, their memo business might be 70% and it might be 98% of their business, right? To the retail community. I mean, from a retailer's perspective, do you think that the memo business is going to continue to grow as a percentage of as it relates to the loose stones, or are people buying on outright to save the cost of capital as a potential way to mitigate cash crunch issues and things like that down the road, if they can buy it cheaper today and have that asset at store value and potentially convert a sale faster because they've got the goods on hand, versus having to call someone and have it shipped in a couple days later. What do you see trending there?
Well, so here my thought is that yes, I believe memo is going to try to trend to be more, but we also have to remember that on the other side of that is the vendor who has to pay for that memo. So it's nothing's free. So if we're taking memo in by the goodness of our vendors, the vendors are paying for that until we sell it and we pay them. So we have to look at it, and I have really good close friends as vendors, and we talk those numbers, those finances, and if you're looking at 1 or 2 points that you're going to have to pay above that on memo, which I'm okay with because I'm not putting my money out right now. And so for me, if a vendor is going to give me that memo to help myself and my business, I'm more than happy to give that 1 or 2 extra points back to my vendors because they deserve it. It's their money being used right now, not mine.
Yeah, I would also say there's sometimes a false perception that the further up the supply chain you go, and or at least if you're looking upward to your vendors, that by definition their margins are so much better than yours, that they must have all kinds of capital, and they'll survive this, right? So my kind of counterpoint to what I said earlier, or maybe I didn't make it forcefully enough, is that if you can pay your vendors, because that's a false perception. There are a number of vendors out there where their margins and their capital structures are pretty tight. And so when they do offer memo goods and things like that, they are doing something, right? It does impact their capital structure. So.
Yeah, and also with that point too, there's strength in numbers also when it comes to the retail side of it, and I think that's very important for us as retailers. Have to remember that get involved, be a member of. And it doesn't need to be just RJ or Leading Jewelers Group. If be involved in those two, or IJO or CBG or Southern Jewelers Organization, get involved in those because the strength is in numbers, and then you are in a community, a good group. And to me, working together as a team is so much better than being by yourself, standing alone and trying to fight it by yourself.
Yep.
So kind of switching topical conversation here, but very much related to what you're just talking about, Jeff, as it relates to the relationship you have with the traders or the vendors. What do those vendors need to do? What could they do if you had a magic wand? What could they do better other than giving you like 365-day memo terms? What could they do to better in order to help their end retail customers? Is there anything?
Well, obviously, this whole virtual reality stuff is going to be extremely important. And some of my diamond vendors have really good imaging of their loose diamonds and some product, and I really think that's where we're going to have to go. And I'm hoping that the digital world helps, and our vendors grow and continue to grow, giving us that digital imaging and the live views at 360 degrees and not just a stock Photoshop.
Yeah, I would agree that the vendors that are going to be able to help their retailers do some of that transitional to the virtual world is going to be very, very helpful. Whether it is product shots, even in terms of electronic marketing assistance, all those sorts of things. Even the ability to, if a vendor today can't drop ship, but you're doing some online selling and you don't want to hold all the inventory and rather have it drop ship direct, that kind of thing. That's all going to be very helpful.
Are you guys seeing, I guess, Jeff and Eric, I like this cadence that we've got going right now. Jeff first, with obviously globalization and, online technology, a lot of manufacturers are selling direct to retailers and kind of disintermediating the vendors, the wholesalers, the traders. Obviously, it depends on the retailer and who's taking advantage of those opportunities. But, generally speaking, for the retail sector as a whole, do you see that as being a positive trend for retailers? Or are they really missing out on kind of those additional service elements? Or are those manufacturers starting to compete on some of those service elements that we're talking about now?
Yeah, absolutely. I frown badly on any vendor that tries to skip a retailer. To me, I have words for that. Obviously, I don't want to say it publicly, but one thing that I said, I'm the chairperson of a merchandise review on an RJO, and one of the things that our committee does when we look at vendors coming in is, are you selling online, and why are you competing against us retailers? And obviously, we have some vendors in RJO that are selling online, but the majority of our vendors that we look at do not sell online, and we support those vendors who are going to just support the local jewelers that have brick and mortar.
Yeah, I think, let me clarify. I'm thinking more so from a diamond manufacturer perspective, in India or wherever, going straight to the retailer, not straight to the consumer,
Okay.
and disintermediating your vendor relationships. Is that a trend you're seeing? Is it positive? What's going on with that? Because we definitely hear about that, right? There's a handful of companies that are in that are going in that direction. Just would like to get a retailer's perspective on that trend.
Yeah, obviously, like for instance, your company and the liquid diamonds. It's a great resource from getting inexpensive and a better pricing on diamonds this way. Um, so yeah, I mean, obviously that's going to trend just because you're going to get better pricing on it, and with the virtual reality and better quality of pictures and imaging. Yeah, it's going to trend that way most likely.
Thoughts on this topic?
Well, so my only take on it is it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, when things tend to get more virtual and more online, there is a natural tendency that we've seen this in other industries, to what we call disintermediate, meaning basically for a particular upstream partner to try to basically skip the downstream partner or the channel partner in other industries. And typically it's usually not a good experience, because basically the upstream partner, the vendor will say, oh, wow, I could make more money if I do this, but they actually lose a lot of visibility into what's going on in the local marketplace. They don't have the sensitivity about it, all that kind of thing. I can't speak directly to when you're talking about the actual diamond manufacturers, in terms of that, if it's more of a commodity product and therefore, can they get away with that? We have seen in other industries, not in jewelry yet, but in other industries, one of the classic mistakes that these disintermediary players do is they're not familiar with channel friendly pricing. What we mean by that is, you typically don't want to undercut your partners, even if you're trying to disintermediate them. You don't want to undercut them, because is essentially then you are absolutely wiping out the potential for that channel, right? And if you fail at what you do, all you end up doing is lowering your own prices, and that doesn't make any sense. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time. Don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, I think we've had a pretty good engaging conversation. There's a little bit of meat left on the bone. I would like to talk to you a little bit more in depth on some of these topics, but the intention here is to try to keep this to roughly an hour. We're pretty much at 5 minutes shy of that right now. So, I want to spend some time acknowledging the audience that's graciously spent time with us today, listening to our thoughts, and have asked some questions. So. That said, Tim has asked, may I ask what percentage of sales on loose diamonds are lab grown versus mined? Do either of you guys have a perspective of that, either within your own businesses or at an industry level?
Well, for me, it's still mine is more popular than lab grown, but I know a jeweler that is 2 hours away from me or 2.5 hours away from me who was probably 80 to 90% lab grown. So I think it's just your model and what you are continue to take with. But I do believe lab is going to continue to grow just because of the price point.
Yeah, I don't have specific figures about that, and there are publicly available figures from other sources out there. I would say that my guess is lab grown will continue to rise somewhat, only because of demographics and other things, and it'll really come down to whether or not the natural diamond folks can convince the younger crowd that, using either the combination of the total resources used and that kind of thing, whether they can win that argument over the long term.
Got it. Another question here is, I think, relevant to Jeff first, if you don't mind. When you're selling your stones and for settings or what have you, is it part of the narrative, or do you feel like the consumer acknowledges diamonds as a store of value, or is it more just part of the jewelry they're buying?
Was that about? Sorry, did you say about the lab part of it?
No, I think we're loose diamonds, right? So are end consumers looking at diamonds as a store of value versus as part of jewelry? Is the word for word question?
No, I would think it's part of a jewelry. I mean, engagements, bridal, whatever. People, at least in our business, are looking at the product as one whole piece. The only time I've ever seen, and it really comes down to, is bigger lab growns is all about price point, and there's some people who want that cheap diamond, and that's all they want, is just something big and blingy, and they don't care what it is, but they want it on their hand. But majority, it's all about the jewelry experience and making it right for that person.
Yeah, we don't actually step into that arena because, again, JBT, we actually are agnostic in terms of whether it's lab grown or real. And immediately when you start talking about does the diamond have an intrinsic value, you're stepping into, is it lab grown versus a real diamond, and we don't take a stance on that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your answer there, Jeff. It's a topic I've asked other folks I've hosted webinars with in prior weeks. Largely on the vendor side, right? Traders and manufacturers, and the consensus is certainly that the idea of a diamond being a store of value is important to the end consumer. And that it's part of the story and narrative associated with the cost of the stone, and in turn the cost of the product, as you say. But there's like a sixth sense of confidence that that product is going to always hold some value because it contains a real certified diamond. So anyway, it was just interesting to kind of hear your thoughts there. Okay, another question, a couple questions actually for Eric. From Way here. The jewelry independent retail industry has been shrinking pretty much annually in the last 15 years. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that's what he says. Long term, do you see independent jewelers go the way of bookstores or movie rental stores, or is there a future for independence and the store of value versus fashion?
No, I think there is a future for the independents because they actually can tell a story, I think, better, that's attuned to their local local constituency, as it were. Because a bookstore is probably a bad analog because it's kind of a commodity item, right? A book from one place is the same book from another. Whereas if you're talking about jewelry, it's a much more personal investment. So I think there will always be room for the mom and pops and the smaller independents. In order to be successful, though, they're gonna have to get good at storytelling, right? That's the new generation that's coming up. They respond to stories and to what am I buying and why, and how does this fit within my life?
Got it. Okay, quick fire questions. I think we touched on a few of the more challenging answers, but these should be probably shorter. So Jeff, as a retailer, Would you feel more comfortable going to a smaller regional trade show compared to JCK Las Vegas?
Yes, absolutely, no question. Obviously, the less the people, the less chances you have. Now, granted, for me, we're here in Wisconsin, our Marathon County, our county that we're in, we have less than 20 people infected right now with the virus. So we're absolutely incredibly lucky for this. So to do that, I really haven't been in the middle of any of this pandemic, so I don't know how it feels or looks like being in the East Coast area, and I could not imagine it. But I personally am not afraid of what's going on. That may be a dumb statement, but I still feel that smaller groups are going to be better, and I hope there's going to be something that comes out of this, maybe in the fall, where we can still get together with small groups. Don't know if that'll be a reality. It's trending not that way, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, if you want my opinion, I think that
cool.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Eric, does the JBT, this is a question from Kevin, have a good date for the Canadian jewelry retail market? I don't know what that means, but maybe you do.
Do we have good data? Probably. And the answer is yes, I don't have it at my fingertips right now. We actually do track the Canadian jewelry market, and we actually track it separately. So we actually have a lot of that same information. I would encourage the attendee to contact JBT. They can literally just call our general number and say, I'd be interested in more of that information, and they'll put them in the right person's hands.
Great. Jeff, how is the RJO managing its guidelines for its members to reopen?
There's actually going to be something sent out from RJO soon. I believe Sarah, our CEO, and some of the management and RJO are preparing for something. So it should be sent out soon to our RJO members.
Okay. Ritesh is commenting on the idea of having a price list for retail use. I assume he's specifically referencing loose stones. It says, in my opinion, we must have an authentic price list for selling purposes to make positive belief of a consumer and investor, specifically high value single stones. The price list should have, with all retailers, it's kind of hard, choppy in terms of what the actual verbiage says there, but just any thoughts on having a price list as it relates to the retail space and certified diamonds?
Well, personally, I think it's extremely hard for someone for retail pricing. Is that what he's asking?
Yeah. If you don't have one, that's fine.
Yeah, to me, it's too hard. Every area of this country is different with their margins, and I should be able to get better margins than somebody who's in a bigger city because there's more competitors there. So, as much as I would love to see that happen, I don't see it ever happening.
Okay. Jeff, look at the comments and questions when you're done. Just so you know, there's somebody who mentioned you have something to do with an iframe technical issue or something like that on the website. So just as a FYI,
it's getting changed as we speak anyway. So no big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Jeff, this is from Praveen. How open would you say RJO retailers are with working with suppliers that can supply apples to apples merchandise for much less, allowing for more profit for the jeweler, or provide their clients a better value and price?
How open would they be? Well, I think they'd be very open with it. I guess I'm not understanding what that's supposed to mean. I mean, a lot of people, if the vendor is not an RJO vendor and want to work with RJO members, if that's what he's meaning, some are open, and there are some who are strictly RJO vendor loyal, and they're not going to buy from anybody except RJO vendors. So it's kind of a tough one, but I'd be more happy to talk with him.
What other same person, Praveen? I know you mentioned the two organizations you're a member of. Are you a member of any other groups within the jewelry trade that you would like to advertise currently? Yes, what groups are you part of, either a member or on the board?
Just RJO, Retail Jewelers Organization, and then Leading Jewelers Guild. They're both membership owned. So the members that are part of the group are the owners of the group. And to me, that's the only way to go. But again, every one of those organizations have a pro and con to it. And so IJO and CBG and SJO, they're all good organizations. But I would highly recommend everyone that's an independent jeweler to be involved in one, because it is so important for the vitality of your business.
Okay, we're down to like the last four here. So real quick, Jeff, in your opinion, how much time is required for a retailer to put his house in order before making new purchases post-COVID normalization? I know you kind of mentioned it earlier. You said something about Q4. Is that your rough estimation of time?
Yeah, I'm hoping by the end of by July or August, I'm hoping we'll have a better understanding of where we're at. Most businesses should be open. What their rules and regulations will be is another thing. So I've been hearing from only one person in at a time. You have to have masks and gloves on, and it's mandatory for both the retailer and the consumer to have on. I don't know. It's it's up in the air, but I would definitely see something happening to be in that last quarter, or at least the end of the third quarter, to see something open up a little bit for buying.
Okay, Jeff, one more question here for you. How important do you think it is to have custom designed jewelry for retailers to ensure footfalls keep coming to their stores?
I think it's extremely important. We do a lot of custom ourselves, and to me, that's the part that keeps you as an individual compared to the big boxes or the .coms that are out there. None of them can do what we can do and do it as quick as we can do it. So absolutely, there's no question. I would put there's so many avenues for you to, as a retailer, to work with vendors to make custom. So don't think just because you can't do it physically in the store. Reach out to vendors, because there are so many vendors out there that are willing to help and make custom. It's incredible how many people are doing it right now.
Erich, changing gears here, two questions related to JBT. Let's tee it up high for you. Why should a retailer become a member of JBT, and how can JBT help retailers?
Okay, so we do actually have a retail membership, and the main purpose of the retail membership is there's a couple purposes for it. But the main one is, by becoming a member of JBT, a retailer can actually keep track of their own credit rating in as close to real time as possible. We encourage all retailers to, whether or not they are a member, to maintain their listing with us. Generally, the more information that a retailer provides, the better result they will get in terms of interaction with the vendor, and many times a better credit rating, depending on whether or not that information is there. And so a retailer that joins us actually will have visibility into some of the same information that the vendor is seeing, and can take steps to do that. And obviously, paying vendors on time is like one of the most key things that you can do, and you can ensure you can do that. You also are given access to what's called our vendor database, which means that you can look up vendors and see what their credit ratings are, which typically can also be an indicator of how good they are to do business with. And so you have that available to you. And then, being able to have the JBT symbol basically it tends to indicate you have to be vetted to be a JBT member. So having the JBT logo or certificate available basically tells folks you've been vetted. You're a good business to do business with.
So a couple more questions. I'm sorry, it just changed on me here. I had the question up here and then it got voted and so it moved down. Is there Eric, any new ways of helping the retailers monitor their ratings? I know you spoke to it earlier.
Yeah, so I just kind of spoke to that. If you are a member of JBT as a retailer, you actually are informed of your rating and are informed if your rating changes. So it's automatically monitored for you.
And does the JBT have retailers' emails available for vendor marketing?
So to an extent, that may be the case. And what I mean by that is we are very, very careful about opt-in policies. So, and we are a member-owned organization that basically, the key thing is we do allow for contact, we do allow for information, but in terms of, for example, bulk selling of email lists of retailers, we don't do that today because we need to make sure that folks are opted in. We don't go for spamming or anything like that.
Great. And Jeff, is the RGO considering expanding its vendor base to make more choices available to its members?
Yeah, I mean, every year we get between 80 and 100 applicants, vendor applicants, and we go through that periodically throughout the year, and we decide. So yes, every year we're always adding vendors to it, definitely.
To pretty much everything else that there is. I might have missed one or two in there, but I did my best to cover the bases. We are 15 minutes over here, so we're going to wrap things up. Do you guys have any closing thoughts you'd like to part with, or are you good to go?
I would just say we're all in this together. I think we also all, we'll get out of this together. The market will eventually turn around. Who knows how long it'll take, but I think especially as long as people keep communicating with each other and helping each other out, I think we'll get through it.
Agreed. And the other thing I'd like to do is we're on a good trend right now of staying local, supporting local. I hope all of us that are in organizations and any type of organization that is jewelry related gets on this bandwagon, and we continue to grow with support local and keep us local jewelers alive.
I want to thank you guys once again. Thank the attendees for making this happen. We are going to share contact information here on the screen for all three of us. If anybody would like to get in touch with any of us for post-webinar questions, comments, and debate, we will be available for that. And again, thanks for attending.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.